Welcome back. In the last video, I showcased you reasonings and a variety of reasonings for the exclusion of Mohamed Salah from your draft. I also showcased 4 drafts without him, which all look pretty decent. Today, I'll be showcasing 3 drafts which don't have Erling Haaland in them. The reasonings of whether to go for Haaland or not to go for Haaland are quite extensive, and thus they deserve their own video, which he will have down the line as we approach the deadline. But for now, I have 3 very impressive drafts, which we're going to get into. Do consider subscribing, as I have a huge amount of content coming this preseason with a variety of unique insights. But without anything else to say, let's get into the video. So this is what I would say is the middling draft. It has a 90% rating, and the other drafts I've shown you have 1 rating higher and 1 rating lower. I was surprised at the strength of the no Haaland drafts that I built. I hadn't really looked into it too much prior to this video because I was very set on buying him. But this has slightly shifted my perspective when I now see the strength on these type of squads. We'll start from the back. You'll see that Sanchez is an ever-present throughout the 3 drafts, simply because at 4.5, it's a brilliant price point to have for a goalkeeper. You realistically want to be spending your funds in the midfield, in the forward line. And also, after Manchester City, he has a very good fixture on, arguably the best out of any goalkeeper. The other thing is, even with Manchester City in Game Week 1, whilst I'm not expecting Chelsea to necessarily win, there is at least the potential for a fixture with a high save volume. And thus, even if he doesn't keep a clean sheet, if Chelsea have an okay day, and he has a good day, 3-4 points is certainly on the card. Who knows? Maybe a bonus point. So, it's not the worst time to play Manchester City, if at all. Right? Now, let's go on to the defense. I've decided to go with this particular draft very heavy in attack, and we'll come on to that and how fruitful that could be. We've got Konsa, Burn, and Robinson, Fulham, Aston Villa, and Newcastle. And they rotate very nicely after Game Week 1 for about 5 weeks. By that point, we could potentially be looking at wildcarding in Game Week 6, in which case we wouldn't even need to move them on. However, if we do, we could only have to make 1 change, and the rest would pretty much sort itself out by fixing that rotation. For example, the games where Konsa and Burn, only one of them have a good fixture, we just buy a player with significantly better fixtures. For example, Brighton, from Game Week 10 onwards, have a very nice fixture on. So we just really need to find someone to fill that 7, 8, 9 gap, which there certainly are. There are quite a few options, which we will look at in another video when it comes to fixture swings and wildcarding. Then we have Oscar Guardiola, and he's a premium that I've got here, and I've decided to have him over the Arsenal boys and the Liverpool boys. The reason being is, obviously, we've had a slight change to the bonus structure. So even if you get a clean sheet, it's now harder to essentially retain bonus points as a defender, given attackers get points for shots on target and if they are fouled in the BPS system. And not only that, every goal they concede, they also lose -4 points in the BPS. Thus, even if they score, it becomes a bit harder. However, he plays in one of the top 2 defenses in the country, and he's playing a left-back, left-winger hybrid role, which sees him arrive into the box far more than most players do that are in the defense, if not all of them. And he has very good ball striking. He moves very well in the final thirds. His body mechanics are very impressive for that of a football player just in general, but especially a defender. And the technical quality to go with that allows him to thrive in the positions that Pep Guardiola essentially creates for him. So his upside, with the good fixtures to come afterwards, is magnificent. Right. Now, moving on to the midfield, this is where this draft gets really. How many drafts so far have you seen with 2 premium midfielders? And there haven't been many. Like, I put out a tweet yesterday, and I scrolled through a lot of the drafts, and there weren't too many 2 premium midfielder drafts. This one has 3, and that is essentially the benefit of relinquishing Erling Haaland. And as you can see in the forward line, we haven't exactly got a bad replacement there. But we've got 3 premium midfielders, which allows us to essentially gamble with captaincy some weeks when we want to target the best fixture, but also provides us with huge upside. Now, I've got a video which discusses all of these 3, but let's go into some more detail on them. Salah naturally is the best right winger in the world, has been for a significant amount of time, and most importantly here, has a very good set of fixtures. He's very captainable in Game Week 1, given its Ipswich. As you saw in my last video, there's pros and cons to that, but on the surface at least, it's a good fixture. Then you have Son, who I actually really like, and I think as a short-term pick, if you are to go through an aggressive strategy, this could work very well. Allow me to explain why. You've got Leicester away first, a newly promoted side, and there have been some issues around Richarlison, so we could see Son play at 9, and that is the type of fixture where he could do really well. Now, after that, he has Everton at home, which again is a home fixture, so you could keep him for that. Then after that, it's Newcastle and Arsenal. if you wanted to sell him ahead of Newcastle and Arsenal, assuming the two are in good form, you could very well do so. And it's a very easy pivot to Cole Palmer. I've left 1.5 in the bank in this draft specifically for that reason. There wasn't anyone I really wanted, and 1.5 allows me to easily upgrade the defense and upgrade Son to Cole Palmer, both with just having 1.5 in the bank. Palmer's fixtures obviously massively improve after game week 1. So potentially, if Chelsea are doing really well, you've already got Nkunku here. A double up, especially a midfield double up. Think about how high the upside is to that. And then you've already got Son's points from game week 1 and 2, assuming he did significantly better than the other premiums, given his fixture. So I really, really like that. And then you have Saka. He'll likely be an ever-present, right? Because if you're going to have him for these first 5, which are more difficult, however, his wide range of skills certainly can thrive in terms of both in a footballing sense and FPL sense in other games. You would probably keep him after that. You would probably retain a lot of value that other players wouldn't. They'll be buying him at 1, 10, 2, 10, 3. You'd already have him at 10. So you'd be ahead of the curve. And 0.1 makes a big difference at the start of the season. Difference between the player who's really in form and the other 4.5 who's just the same as pretty much everyone else. So it does make a difference at the start of the season. And then you can just kind of play shuffleboard essentially with them. FPL Chai, I spoke about him in the last video. That's what he did when he didn't go Erling Haaland last year. And he found himself in Game Week 20 as the world number 2. So with that in mind, this strategy provides you with a significant amount of upside. Then you have Eze at 7 million. Now, I'm not particularly bullish on Palace's fixtures compared to others. However, he is an asset at his price point that gives you something that pretty much none of them do. Maybe a few you could argue, but with penalties, with arguably having more dominion over set pieces now that as Elise's left, his open play threat, his assist threat, his goal threat, his technical quality, his ball striking. This is a player who has an enormous ceiling, as we saw in the last week of the season, right? An 18-pointer from what was then like a 6 million midfielder is not normal. However, we weren't particularly surprised because of how good of a player he is and the conditions that he has in this Palace side. He has a lot of dominion over that left side and in those central spaces. And with a high volume of actions, when given to a quality player, you can only expect returns, right? So even though the fixtures I don't think are particularly great, at 7 million, you're getting such a safe, secure asset with a high floor and a high ceiling. So this midfield could run right. And that's not to mention Nkunku, right? Enzo today came out in his press conference and discussed how good of a player and how important of a player he could be for Chelsea. Now, for those of you who haven't watched him, I would encourage you to watch some Bundesliga clips of him. Even if you haven't and you're not willing to do that, he is a top player. He's a top player. All you have to do is see the clubs that were interested in him, see how long the transfer saga took, see how other managers have spoke about him, and just see the level of his quality. And it's a little bit different to the rest of the Chelsea players. I was very impressed with Jackson in the second half of the season, but it's not the same level between him and Nkunku. It's not the same level between Nkunku and Mudryk. This is a top player. And injuries probably mask that for the English audience. But I assure you, if he's fit, which he looks to be because he's had a long recovery, he will be an integral player in this Chelsea side. He will have brilliant expected minutes. And with his level of proficiency, especially in the box, he's going to score goals. And he's going to get assists, given how good of a connector he is. So for me, this midfield looks absolutely stacked. Then we move on to the forward line. I'm not going to speak about Isak too much. I think he should be an absolute lock. Arguably the best fixtures in the medium term for any of the attacking assets. He finished last season on absolute fire. He's a top player. He's very talented. I don't really need to talk about him too much. I'm going to come to Watkins last for a reason. Now this bench is pretty decent. We've got 2 Southampton assets that are likely to play, and both have upside. The forward, Stewart, has done quite well in the Championship. And if you look at the fans' general consensus around him, it's very positive. Harwood Bellis obviously racked up a lot of assists last year. But if you ever needed them to play, which you shouldn't with a squad this strong across the board, then at least you have 2 players that you know could potentially get a haul. Now, throughout this 38-game week season, will they haul? Probably at least once, twice, maybe 3 times. And who knows, maybe you just get a bit lucky. But at least having them gives you the option to get lucky, right? It's better than just going for a safer asset, in my opinion, than, for example, Harry Winks, if we were to be in a 3-4-3, because it's much harder to get a haul out of him. Sure, he's going to score 1 goal, 2 goals from outside the box. But at least with these guys, when they do something, they're probably going to haul. So I really like that. Bentley, I'll just be completely honest with you. There's no 4 million goalkeeper that really is outstanding at the moment. That's presenting himself as the best option. Potentially Fabianski if Areola leaves. Thus, I've just got him for now. And going back to Ollie Watkins, right. I've got him here because I felt like I had to have at least one draft with Ollie Watkins. And the fact that he's included makes this my second favorite draft, whereas the next one is my favorite. He, however, for me, is not worth 9 million in the first two fixtures. I know this is a no Haaland draft, but essentially, if you're losing Haaland, many people are going to Watkins. You just have to look at the ownership levels, right, of Ollie Watkins. He's the most selected player in the game, I believe, at this point. He's probably gone above Cole Palmer from the last time I checked. With that in mind, West Ham away under a new manager and the quality of players they have probably becomes a significantly tougher fixture. Moyes did a decent job, but he probably wasn't optimizing the level of talent they had in that squad. And that's not an easy fixture. And then you have Arsenal as well. And I just start to wonder, at 9 million, is it the most efficient use of those funds in the first 2 weeks? If you're not going Haaland, you can pretty much get to him very easily from, game week 3, where his real run starts. Could you not go for a Chris Wood? Could you not go Kai Havertz in the first 2? I know he's got Villa, but Arsenal naturally are a better side. So I just don't think that Watkins is worth 9 million. And we're going to go into him in significant detail. I'm going to analyze the fixtures in another video because obviously this one's about the drafts. But for me, even if you were to go with this draft, I'd still consider having maybe 2.5 in the bank and then going Havertz, right? If you wanted to be really bullish on Arsenal and take an aggressive route there, right? But you could easily go someone else. You could go Dom Solanke if you wanted to be very safe. You could go Chris Wood. You could attack the fixtures potentially from game week 2 with Rodrigo Muniz, another draft, etc., right? But all I'm saying is just because you don't go Haaland, you don't have to go Watkins. Right, now you see the top left corner, and we have game week 1 rating from Fantasy Football Hub, and this team's at a 90%. So if you did want to check out what your team is, then you can do so with the link in the description. It'll take you straight to the My Team site as opposed to the sign up page. And you can have a play around with the tools and then decide whether it's right for you. And this is just my personal opinion and a very generalized opinion that for the price that the membership is set at, especially with 50% off, especially with money back if you don't win your mini league, terms and conditions do apply and you should read them. They're not particularly extensive. It's a very, very good value for the price you're paying. And thus I would at least consider and see what you have on offer. Just click the link in the description and you will see the brilliant service that you're being provided with. So now let's get into draft 2, which is actually my favorite one. Right, now this draft is my favorite one, and it also has a 95% rating. Some of my other drafts, which I really like, the algo wasn't too fond of, but this one we agree on. 4 changes. So instead of having Ollie Watkins here, we have Leon Bailey as the Aston Villa cover at the 6.5 million price point. And instead of having Kunku as the Chelsea cover, we go to Palmer. Then Watkins becomes Muniz, and Robinson becomes Trent in a defense, which is now Guardiola and Trent every week, and Concert and Burn with their wonderful rotation. Right. I spoke about Sanchez last time. So again, you get a goalkeeper every time, good fixture, high save volume, right? In gaming 1, brilliant. But this is what I really like about the team. You get Trent and Guardiola every week. Every single week, you have 2 defenders who have the highest upside out of pretty much all of them for the 2 of the best 3 teams in the league. And you just get that on repeat. And you don't have to touch it. They both have pretty decent fixture runs. In fact, Liverpool's is very good. And I actually really like City's, considering what I think they're going to do this year, which is very well. So with that in mind, you don't have to touch them for at least, well, probably until you wildcard, potentially in game week 6, right? And that's great. That will just be a very secure source of points with a high floor. If Trent is performing terribly, if Liverpool are having a really bad year, just get rid of him and reinvest the funds elsewhere. Upgrade Muniz if you don't like him. Upgrade Bailey if you want to get a 3-man premium midfield, 4-man premium midfield, right? Okay. But other than that, you have a very secure source of points and you have a high ceiling. And I think that's what it's really about. I don't really share the philosophy that you have to be super safe in FPL that I know some others do. I think it's worth it to always go for the upside. And at least with Guardiola and Trent, that's what you're getting. And you still maintain 3 premiums in the form of Saka, Salah, and Palmer, which is great. We had that in the last draft, but now we also have a premium defender. I spoke about Leon Bailey as the Aston Villa cover, and there's no reason he can't outscore Ollie Watkins. Diaby's left, his expected minutes increase. He gets to play a role which he's probably more suited to because they will tweak the system because you don't have a runner off Watkins that you did in Diaby, so they have to change that slightly. And the other thing is, the responsibility on the pitch changes. It's no longer him and Diaby and Watkins. It's him and Watkins. And yes, Rodgers will look great, but he's more of a senior player. He will feel like, and you see this with so many players when transfers happen, someone has to step up to the plate in terms of responsibility on the ball, responsibility to score goals, and it will be him. It can't really be anyone else but him. Sure, it can be John McGinn, but I think given the technical quality and the difference of that between them, it will be Bailey. Now, that being said, John McGinn is underrated, but nonetheless, Bailey is a better player in terms of at least being a technician in the final third and goal threat and for FPL, right? And then the only other thing that we need to worry about is, can Muniz cover Watkins? And sure, Man United away first up doesn't look great, especially given the fact they've strengthened. After that, it's a very nice run. He's been handed the number 9 shirt, which is actually quite a big deal. If a club are going to give you the number 9 shirt, they trust you. And the other thing is, I spoke about earlier how you really want your team to have a high ceiling so that you can achieve the top ranks. We're not trying to settle for, a decent rank. We're really going for the top ranks here. Well, Muniz won Premier League Player of the Month last year, which is extremely impressive for a Fulham player to win it. And I mean that with all due respect. But if we apply some common sense, it is very unlikely that you said at the start of the season that a Fulham player was to win it. But he did, and he was brilliant, and he deserved it. Thus, given he has that in his locker, that's a high ceiling player. And I think he, out of many of the options at that price point in the forward category, is probably worth the gamble. Because if he comes good, he'll come really, really good. And thus, I think this side is brilliant. Sure, it doesn't have Erling Haaland, and naturally, that's the biggest omission. But look what it facilitates. 3 premiums, arguably 4 if you were to downgrade Trent in the midfield, and a very, very strong team elsewhere. And that's not to mention, look at the other asset. Burn and Konsa, good rotation. Sanchez, great fixtures. Eze, ever reliable. Isaac, ever reliable. And both of them high ceilings. I really, really like it. Right. Now, I would never present a bad draft to you because I would never want to mislead you just for the sake of having content. But of all the 3, this is my least favorite. If I am going to have to admit Erling Haaland from the side, I would like a very, very stacked midfield. Now, look, Anthony Gordon, he won me over last season. I was so impressed, and I wasn't a particularly bullish person on the move, but he proved me completely wrong, and he was very impressive, and he deserved his call-up. I really like Morgan Gibbs-White as a player, and I already spoke about my admiration for Nkunku. However, I don't feel as safe having them, and I'm not as bullish on those 3 as I am maybe a Bukayo Saka, as a Cole Palmer. So to only have 2 premiums, it doesn't sit great with me in the midfield. Now, yes, I get Trent and Guardiola in the same defense as last time, which is great. But it's the midfield which really puts me off this side in comparison to the others. Now, I don't think it's bad. I actually think it's pretty decent. But you would have to nail Nkunku, Gibbs-White, and Gordon and be right about them. Whereas with the other drafts, you can be a bit more wrong because it's hard to be wrong about those premiums. They were at least going to get, maybe 1 assist a game, average at least like 4.5 points. Whereas with these guys, you could see some blanks simply because, for example, Gibbs-White plays for Forest. They won't create as many chances. Unlikely they create as many chances as a Liverpool or an Arsenal. Gordon's probably the most reliable out of the 3, but I still don't trust him as much naturally as a Bukayo Saka, right? Because just in terms of his quality and the fact that Newcastle haven't really strengthened. And then Nkunku's not Palmer. He's not as established in the league, but like I said, I'm bullish. One thing I do really like about this draft is Kai Havertz, and it's the first time he's appeared in one. But I think he's going to do really well. If you watch my premium midfielders video, you saw how I spoke about Saka, and my biggest concern about him was not actually Arsenal's spread of output, was Kai Havertz and taking the output for himself. I think he could become the essential central figure in that Arsenal attack, whereby everything starts to really flow for him. It's a little bit similar to Postecoglou, right? His system is designed to create everything for the 9, right? His 9 is meant to be on the end of moves, is meant to find him in the best goal-scoring positions. And I think Arteta's system is slightly going towards that. And what really points me in that direction is how willing Arteta was to keep Saka wide throughout the season. Yes, he allowed him to come outside. It wasn't as rigid as Guardiola's structure, but he was still wider than I think most people expected. I think people more so expected him to at least come into the half spaces a bit more. But no, Odegaard kind of dominated those zones. And thus, with the way Havertz looked towards the end of the season, with Jesus becoming more of a winger as opposed to 9, given we've seen slight finishing deficiency compared to other 9s in the past, I think Havertz could do really well with really good minutes because he is such a robust, strong, physical player, and he helps in both boxes, right? And he helps defensively because he will be brilliant on the press, but he's also a huge figure from set pieces. So him as an asset, I really like. I think if you take the first draft, maybe go Watkins to Havertz and then upgrade the midfield a little bit, or upgrade the defense to get Trent or Robertson or Van Dijk, then I think it's really, really solid. But we will get into defenders in another video. But in terms of this draft, my least favorite by a little bit, but nonetheless, a good draft. That is all for today. We will have a video tomorrow. We will have a video on Friday, and we will have a video on Saturday, potentially Sunday as well. So please do consider subscribing. Like I said, a huge variety of content and unique insights coming, especially as we approach the season. I get into some more tactical videos, which haven't really been done before in the FPL scene. I'll be looking at preseason structures, systems, how certain players will perform against certain fixtures, like I did for Odegaard, for example, and a variety of things around that. Also, do consider checking out Fantasy Football Hub. It is in the description, and you can get your draft rated and see how close you can get to 100%. And that's all for today. I shall see you tomorrow, and I very much look forward to the video. Goodbye.